to security less than 2 hours ago.
Yeah, well, maybe they forgot to lock the door. Look, I'm gonna try and find out what he's up.
Number 10. The show that wanted to scare you. UFO wasn't built on hope. It was built on the idea that the good guys might lose, and that even if they won, it cost them something they couldn't get back. Unlike the chrome and smiles optimism of most sci-fi of the era, this show ran on psychological exhaustion. Shadow's operatives sacrificed marriages, relationships, and their own peace of mind to defend a humanity that had no idea it needed defending. No medals, no parades, just a war that ate you alive from the inside. For 1970 network television, that was genuinely radical territory, and it's the reason this show never quite left the people who watched it. If buried TV history and forgotten sci-fi is your thing, subscribing means you get the next deep dive the day it drops, not 6 months later when the algorithm decides you're ready for it.
What the blazes are they waiting for? Well, Colonel, what does the computer think?
Number 9. The most elaborate cover story in television history. Shadow's global headquarters wasn't hidden in a mountain or buried under a government building. It was hidden under a film studio, a fully operational, completely legitimate commercial production lot. On the surface, lights, cameras, people making movies. 50 feet underground, humanity's last line of defense against alien invasion. The cover was perfect precisely because it was the most ordinary-looking business imaginable, hiding in the most ordinary way possible. And the beauty of it was that no one would ever think to look, because the film industry was already full of people keeping secrets and pretending things were other than they were. From there, Shadow coordinated a network that spanned the planet and the moon base on the lunar surface, the submarine-launched skydiver platform patrolling the oceans, tracking stations operating in classified isolation worldwide, a shadow government that made your average spy thriller look like a neighborhood watch program. The genius of that premise was what it did to every ordinary location you'd ever seen. Film studios, office buildings, suburban streets, any of it could be hiding something. The show turned the mundane world into a map of possible concealments. Paranoia never looked so stylish, and it never felt so completely justified.
You have a very good film there.
Thank you, Straker. Get an underwater cameraman down there first thing tomorrow morning.
Number 8. The Commander's Hidden Wound. Straker always looked like a man carrying something heavy. The show eventually told you exactly what it was, and it didn't flinch. In Confetti Check OK, the series pulled back the armor and showed you the defining tragedy of his personal life. His young son was involved in a serious accident, a devastating event, and the absolute secrecy of Shadow meant Straker couldn't even be fully present for his own family during the worst moment a parent can face. The demands of the mission didn't pause for personal catastrophe. They never do. His relentless, almost inhuman dedication to defending Earth wasn't professionalism. It was grief, redirected. It was guilt, weaponized into purpose. The war gave him somewhere to put everything that had nowhere else to go. Ed Bishop played those scenes with a restraint that made them hit twice as hard. No speeches, no breakdowns, just a man slowly turning to stone on the inside. One operational decision at a time. You watched him function perfectly and understood that the functioning was the wound. For a network action show, that was a level of character writing most adult dramas wouldn't attempt. It's one of the main reasons UFO never entirely left the people who watched it, because it understood that the cost of heroism is almost always personal and almost always invisible to everyone except the person paying it.
Thank you, Colonel.
I hope the answer's satisfactory, sir.
Number 7. The villains you almost felt sorry for. Most sci-fi antagonists want to conquer you, enslave you, or destroy your planet for abstract ideological reasons. The aliens in UFO wanted something far more unsettling. They wanted your organs. The unnamed alien race at the core of the series was dying. Their homeworld was gone. Their biology was failing, and the only thing that could sustain them was compatible human tissue. They weren't invading out of ideology or empire building. They were the last survivors of a dead civilization, doing whatever it took to keep breathing. That context transformed them from simple monsters into something genuinely complicated. They were still terrifying, still a lethal threat, still the enemy, but their motivation was rooted in survival rather than malice. That distinction mattered. It made every Shadow victory feel slightly ambiguous, and every alien death feel like watching something irreplaceable disappear from the universe. In an era when most TV aliens were rubber-suited conquerors with no discernible interior life, giving the enemy a tragedy was extraordinary. What made it land differently as an adult was the realization that they weren't wrong to be desperate. They were just wrong about whose world should pay the price. The horror and the sympathy were completely inseparable, pulling in opposite directions in the same scene at the same time. That's not writing for children. That's writing. And here's the question the show never quite answered. but planted deliberately. If humanity were in the same position, the last survivors of a dying world, bodies failing, one viable option remaining, what exactly would we do differently? The aliens were the villains. The show was wise enough to never let you forget they were also a mirror.
Yes, sir. We'll do our best.
Number 6, the show that spent a fortune and looked every bit of it. You know the feeling when you're watching something and you can simply tell that money was spent. Every frame of UFO carried that feeling. At the time of production, UFO was the single most expensive British television series ever made. Each episode carried a budget of approximately £100,000. In 1969 and 1970 money, a figure that dwarfed what most British productions spent on entire series, not individual episodes. That money went into intricate model work for the space sequences, the sprawling multi-level shadow command center, the moonbase interiors, the vehicles, the costumes, essentially constructing an entire alternate world from scratch. Gerry Anderson had spent years perfecting detailed miniature effects on Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet, and UFO was where all of that accumulated expertise met live action for the first time. The result looked genuinely cinematic on a television screen, which was almost unheard of in 1970. The downside, as we'll get to, is that budgets that large have a way of creating problems that no amount of good television can solve.
See anything, Paul?
Number 5. The commander quietly changed his hair and nobody said a word. Here is one of the most gloriously low-key continuity mysteries in television history. If you watched UFO straight through, you may have noticed that Commander Straker's hair shifted from blonde to noticeably darker brown somewhere mid-series. No explanation, no plot development, no alien beam weapon that changed his pigmentation. Actor Ed Bishop simply decided, in real life, off camera, to cut his hair and change its color. The production was already deep into filming. They kept moving. No continuity patch, no throwaway line of dialogue, no lampshade hung on it whatsoever. The whole world was ending every week on that show. The commander's hair was genuinely the least of anyone's problems, and the production clearly agreed. It's the kind of small, human, slightly chaotic detail that makes you love a production even more. Behind every polished sci-fi epic is a crew working at breakneck speed who occasionally just had to let things go.
UFOs approaching from NML-12. Do not attempt to intercept.
Number 4. The pressure gauge that kept climbing. Television in 1970 had rules. Not always written down, not always logical, but rules. UFO had a consistent habit of finding the edge of them. The series navigated friction with broadcast standards of the era, encountering pushback over content deemed too intense or tonally challenging for its time slot. The show's willingness to explore psychological darkness, moral ambiguity, and scenarios with no clean resolution put it in uncomfortable territory for network gatekeepers more accustomed to clear-cut heroes and tidy endings. Nothing here veered into explicit territory. This was still prime-time British television, but the creative pressure Gerry Anderson's team applied to the medium was real and documented. They were consistently pushing the ceiling of what a family sci-fi show was supposed to feel like. Episodes that ended without a victory. Protagonists who made decisions the audience wasn't supposed to applaud. Villains the audience wasn't entirely supposed to hate. Every one of those choices had to clear a room full of people whose job was to make sure it didn't. Given the bleak tone we established at number 10, none of this should surprise you. A show built on paranoia and personal sacrifice was never going to sit comfortably inside a box marked harmless entertainment. What's remarkable isn't that it encountered resistance, it's that so much of it made it through anyway.
Periscope there. Slowly. All right, sir.
Number 3. The office chair that was actually a superpower. Forget the Batmobile. The single coolest piece of covert technology in 1970s television was a desk chair. Commander Straker's office above the Shadow Film Studio looked like a completely ordinary executive setup. Desk, chair, the trappings of a legitimate film producer going about his legitimate business. But when duty called, the desk would swivel aside, and Straker's chair would lower him via a hidden lift directly into the underground command center below. No running to a secret door, no pulling a bookshelf lever, just a smooth, unhurried descent, like the building itself was taking him where he needed to go. The mechanism was entirely practical. a working lift built into the actual set, not a camera trick, which meant every take of that sequence involved Ed Bishop actually descending into the floor. The production built the thing because it needed to work on camera, and it needed to work every time. That kind of practical commitment to a single design idea is exactly why the scene became iconic rather than merely clever. It perfectly captured Shadow's core design philosophy: invisible, seamless, hiding in plain sight. And every kid who watched that scene immediately wanted to retrofit their bedroom. Some of us never entirely stopped wanting that.
Look, Doctor, is there any chance he's resistant? No.
Number 2. Purple was never practical until it was. Here is the fact that will genuinely change how you watch old episodes. Those purple wigs weren't a futuristic fashion statement. They were a production solution. The lavender purple wigs worn by the Moonbase female crew guaranteed continuity of appearance across every episode, regardless of what was happening with the actress's real hair. No reshoots because someone got a trim. No hours of painstaking style matching between filming blocks. The wigs created a uniform, otherworldly visual signature that solved a real logistical headache and accidentally created one of the most iconic looks in British sci-fi history. You see a purple wig, you know exactly where you are, who you're watching, and what it cost to put that person there. One detail doing 3 jobs at once, and it leads directly into what those wigs were paired with, and the women who made the whole thing unforgettable.
Security less than 2 hours ago.
Yeah, well, maybe they forgot to lock the door. Look, I'm gonna try and find out what he's up to.
Number 1. Silver, purple, and absolutely unforgettable. If UFO had a single image that burned itself into the visual memory of a generation, this was it. And it earned that status on 2 levels simultaneously. The women of Moonbase, silver catsuits, those unmistakable purple wigs, moving through lunar corridors with the calm authority of people who were genuinely responsible for civilization's survival, became instant cultural icons. The look was futuristic and striking, but they were also the operators.
I'll lower the lights. Must help with the atmosphere. In case we frighten away the spirits.
They were the ones who detected incoming alien craft, coordinated the intercept response, and ran the most critical defense installation in human history from 238,900 miles above Earth. The visual boldness ensured nobody would forget them. The writing ensured they deserved to be remembered. For 1970 television, presenting women in roles of genuine operational authority on the literal front line of a secret interplanetary war was quietly significant. Not announced, not editorialized, just shown. Episode after episode, as though it were simply the most natural arrangement in the world. Because in the world of UFO, it was. The show didn't treat their competence as a point to be made. It treated it as a fact to be demonstrated. And that's a distinction that matters more than it might seem. The difference between a show that congratulates itself for its choices and a show that simply makes them and moves on. The visual impact of that silver and purple image ensured that decades later, it remains the shorthand for the entire show. One image instantly recognized, carrying everything the series was at its best. That is what iconic actually means. Not that something was popular, but that it created a picture in the mind that the mind refuses to release. Bonus fact: the ending that never came. Some shows end on their own terms. UFO did not get that courtesy. The series was canceled after 26 episodes, storylines unresolved, characters left in narrative limbo. The reasons were interconnected. The enormous per-episode budget had grown into a genuine financial problem, and the show failed to secure the consistent American distribution deal that the economics required. Without that transatlantic revenue, numbers stopped working. Gerry Anderson had plans for a second season that would have evolved the show significantly. Not a continuation of the same format, but a genuine development of the world, the characters, and the conflict. Those plans were absorbed and transformed into a different project entirely. Space, 1999, which means UFO essentially donated its future to give birth to something else. The second season that never happened became the raw material for a show that did. The ideas survived, the story didn't. Cold comfort for anyone waiting to find out how the alien war ended, and colder still when you consider that the questions UFO raised were exactly the kind worth answering. The unanswered questions are still out there. 55 years later, nobody has answered them. So there it is, a show too expensive, too dark, and too honest about the cost of heroism to fit inside any box television had prepared for it. UFO gave us a shadow organization hiding under a film studio, alien invaders who were tragic rather than simply evil, a commander quietly hollowed out by personal loss, and a visual style so distinctive it still reads as futuristic more than half a century on. It ran 26 episodes, spent a fortune doing it, and left without a resolution. Not a bad run, not a bad legacy, and given everything it was willing to say about what heroism actually costs, probably a more honest one than most shows that ran 10 times as long. Which one landed hardest? The bleak psychological toll hiding underneath the action, the truth behind the purple wigs, or the fact that the whole thing ended without a single answer? Drop it in the comments. Shadow thanks you for your service.